So we're deep into the second half of Mark's Gospel today. And the second half of Mark's Gospel is really all about discipleship. What does it mean to follow Jesus? And in a very particular way, today's Gospel talks about the importance of faith. That at the heart of our following of Jesus is that we believe. But I want to suggest that there are different dimensions to faith. And perhaps the most obvious one that we think about is, well, if I'm a Catholic, I believe certain things. There are certain things that I put my faith in, that I believe. I believe that God is a trinity of persons. I believe Jesus is truly divine and truly human. And that's an important part of faith. We believe those things and many other things. But there's another dimension of faith that's actually really embodied here by the widow in today's gospel. And that is not so much about the content of faith, that I believe this about God, about the human being, about our eternal destiny and so on, but actually that I would have a particular kind of faith like the widow. Because what you notice here is that Jesus holds her up as an example. He says, look at her as a model for what it means to be a follower of mine. So let's unpack that. What I want you to notice first and foremost is that the liturgy today gives us two widows. There's a widow in the first reading and there's another widow in the gospel. The widow in the first reading from the book of Kings is also a great model of faith. We're told that Elijah the prophet comes to Zarephath, which is a town that was in the midst of a famine and a drought. And so there's a great need for all of the people. And we're told that the widow is more or less preparing for death. She doesn't see how she can have enough food to last through the drought, the famine that's going on. And so when Elijah comes and says, would you give me something to eat, give me a little bit of bread, her response is, look, I haven't got that. I'm going to make what little we have left, and then my son and I are going to eat it, and that's it, we're done. And Elijah says to her, if you do it, you'll find that your little jar will not run out. In other words, that a miracle will happen and you'll be able to continue to eat, that you won't starve. And, I mean, imagine for a moment, just take a step back for a moment and think, imagine if you were in that scenario. What are the chances you'd say, sure, Elijah, I'll feed you first and then I'll look after myself and my son? But that's what the woman does. And the words of the prophet come true. She's able to continue to provide for herself and her son throughout the famine until the famine breaks. So she's a great model of faith. She trusts that the prophet Elijah is speaking God's word, and she trusts that God will provide in the way that the prophet has said. I want to suggest that the woman in the gospel today has even more faith than the first widow. That the widow that Jesus watches, Jesus is doing a bit of people watching, isn't he? Where you can imagine there's the treasury and, you know, like if you're sitting in like a little square somewhere and you're watching the people go by, perhaps in a foreign town. Jesus is doing a bit of that in Jerusalem, right? And he watches these people go in. He sees the rich put a lot of money in. How does he know they're putting in a lot of money? Well, it was all coins, and there would have been 12 fish-shaped boxes. And what would happen is that you'd hear the coins. And so he knows the rich are putting a lot in because you can hear coin after coin after coin dropping down. Then the widow comes and she puts 2 coins in. How does he know that? Tinkle, tinkle. That's it. I want to suggest that that's the sound of gospel faith. Not 1 tinkle, but 2, right? She could have kept 1 coin. 1 coin would have bought her hardly anything. We're told it was such a tiny amount. And you've got to remember at this time too, there's no social security net for widows. And if you're a widow it's not that you receive the right of inheritance too. If your husband died, whatever he had went actually to the children. And so widows were reliant on the goodness of others. She's got 2 coins. She could have held one back, but she puts the coin in. Both coins. And so the tinkle 1 and tinkle 2, that's the sound of the gospel. Because what she's doing there is she's saying, all that I have is yours, says Jesus. I'm not holding anything back. I'm giving everything to God. And unlike, this is why her faith is stronger than the woman, the first widow in the first reading. The woman in the first reading, she had the promise from Elijah that God would provide, that the jar would not be emptied. The widow in the gospel today doesn't get that assurance. She's not spoken to Jesus. She's not spoken to anybody. She's just put the coins in. This is a measure, a sign of her trust. I'm trusting that God is going to look after me. Jesus praises her in contrast to the rich. He says the rich have given from their surplus. They've carefully calculated what they're not going to miss. If you give something from your surplus, you don't notice. You don't notice it. You don't feel it in your hip pocket, right? This woman's feeling it very deeply, right? She's saying, I'm trusting everything to God. Now, Jesus is not in this saying something about how much we should give financially to God or anything like that. I don't think that's the point of the story. The point of the story is this kind of faith. That this woman is prepared to trust in God, that he will provide for all of her needs, that she'll give everything. I don't know about you, but I've got to say that I find that a challenge. To say, Lord, I'm not going to hold part of me back, that all of my life belongs to you, that I'm not going to give maybe from my surplus, like I'm going to give you the time that I've got left over after I've done all the other things that are important in my life. That's your time, God. And oh gosh, I got to the end of another day and I've kind of squeezed you out because life was so full and busy. No, it's saying actually everything, every part of my day, all that I have belongs to you. This is why Jesus praises the woman, and it's why he holds her up as a model of faith. Can you hear the trust that she's placing in God? The obedience that she's giving to God? Everything she has belongs to him. So, what might that mean for us today? Well, I know for myself, as I was praying with the gospel during the week, as I was reflecting upon it, I was like, all right, there's something here that's really important for me about actually really entrusting my whole life to the Lord. I feel like that's something that I've done many times. I felt challenged this week that I've got to continue to do it. I've got to do it in fresh and new ways, because there's something in the human spirit, there's something in the human heart that goes, sure, I'll trust you, and then I'll take a little bit back. Yes, I believe in you, but actually probably on my terms rather than in the way that you'd like me to. Yes, I'm going to trust you with my future, but I'm going to make sure I look after myself as best I can. The gospel today invites us, a word that we might use here is a surrender. That we would be able to surrender our lives to God. What does that do? It fundamentally breaks the myth of control, right? There's something deep in us that thinks that we're actually in charge of our lives, that we're in control. We work hard to maintain that, but I want to suggest that it's an illusion. None of us are really in control of our lives. We have some agency, we have some freedom, but we're not in control. Circumstances can change in an instant. Control's an illusion. There are so many things that are well outside our control that affect our lives in all sorts of ways. And so this morning we're invited to actually dispel that illusion, to say, okay, I know I'm not in charge. I know I'm not really in control. That's scary, but you know, it would be scarier still if there wasn't someone that we could trust our lives to, that actually is in charge, that promises to look after us, not to protect us from all calamities or challenges or trials. Jesus never promises that. But he does promise us that he will be with us in every circumstance, that he's with us in every moment, that when we trust him, we will find that he has been faithful to us. We're invited to surrender today, to make a deeper yes to Jesus. That's the dimension of faith that he's highlighting in the gospel today. So let's bring that intention, that prayer, into the Mass this morning.